The U.S. government has given billions of dollars to businesses in an effort to curb the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. The government will begin to pursue recouping these funds in 2021. Aggressive penalties will be imposed on companies that do not follow regulations and guidelines for proper use of these funds. Criminal charges are already being levied on fraudulent use. Don't suffer again. Get a customized business operations success suite from Elite 8 Tax and Financial Services for your company today. BOSS packages include entity formation, payroll, accounting and bookkeeping, tax planning, tax filings, and quarterly strategy sessions to minimize your tax liability, increase efficiency, and maximize your profits. Make your appointment today at elite8financial.com. Get the guidance, tools, and protection your business needs now. Get BOSS. Get behind the shield.
This is Dr. Tamia Guest with Rejuvenating Chiropractic.
This is Nara Reed with Modified Nutrition Health Coach.
This is Karen Marcel with June Street Barbershop.
This is Tiffany Marcel with Marcel Luxury Realty, and you're listening to Boss Talk Radio.
We could not continue to do our filing of our taxes in the traditional sense that we've been doing for so many years. So we opted to go ahead and take the advice from one of our friends that went ahead and referred us. And since he referred us, we said, we decided let's go ahead and check Elite 8 out, and we're glad we did. They were extremely very thorough, so that's part of the excitement that we really enjoyed with Elite 8. So some of the parts of the values that we really enjoyed was that they were, beyond the fact that they were trustworthy, very thorough, extremely responsive, and the fact that we could do things online just the same that we were able to do in the traditional sense.
Get behind the shield. Welcome to another episode of Boss Talk Radio. I'm your host, George Dandridge Jr., and what I do is solve tax problems. But more about Boss Talk Radio, the Business Operations Success Suite. What we do is bring you industry leaders from across the different walks of life to share their success stories, their struggles on the way to success, and some best practices. And we have a very special guest today that we're going to get into in a minute. But if you are watching from Facebook, go ahead and share the video. If you are watching from YouTube, go ahead and make sure you hit like and subscribe. We're not doing Instagram because I don't want y'all to see all behind the curtain and all the little magic tricks and stuff I have going on. If you're watching the playback, make sure you you do a hashtag playback and let me know where you're tuning in from. As usual, we're going to have a whole bunch of information for you, so you want to have your pen and paper, be prepared to enter some questions for our guests or for myself so we can bring those on the screen. Be sure to give StreamYard your name and whatnot so I can address you appropriately so it doesn't just say Facebook user or YouTube user. And we're going to go ahead and get right into it. Hey, shout out to my man Dave Anderson coming in from Philly. Glad to have you watching. Be back right after this.
Welcome to Boss Talk Radio, the #1 online business and entrepreneurial talk show. Brought to you by Elite 8 Tax and Financial Services.
Boss Talk Radio, keeping it real, yeah, that's for sure. I said a Boss Talk Radio, here for your needs, we'll crack the code. He the boss.
He gon' fix your situation like there ain't no time for wasting. We ain't playing when we saying
he the boss.
And if you ever have a problem, he gon' show you how to solve it. Listen in and he'll show you he the boss.
Talk
Here's your host, the Texas tax expert, George Dandridge.
Talk Radio, here for your needs, we'll crack the code. He the boss.
So there's some confusion on this thing called the tax deadline, and some of you, for whatever reason beyond my understanding, wanted to challenge this. But if you own a C corporation, yes, your tax return was actually due yesterday or a timely filed extension. No, you didn't get it mixed up. Your personal return is actually due March 17th, unless you live in Texas, Oklahoma, or Louisiana, where it's been extended to June 15th. watch your conduct. Just because the government extended your deadlines don't mean your tax professionals will necessarily be in the building or whatever. If you're looking for a new tax professional, be sure to reach out to us at 1-866-235-4838, or you can go to our website and make an appointment at Elite 8 Financial/appointments. And we're going to go ahead and pay some bills and be right back. If you haven't subscribed already, be sure to go and check out Business Bully TV. They're doing big things over there. We're going to have Boss Talk Radio airing there pretty soon. And oftentimes I'm asked the question, who's doing the graphics, who's doing the background? And here it is.
Finding your brand space in this ever-changing economy can be challenging to new and established businesses. Graphic Line Media can help launch your business's brand potential to unknown places with creative revisioning that relentlessly presses the competition. From graphic design, web, print, apparel, media, and social, we have something designed to grow your business. Don't hesitate. Rule your space. Visit Graphic Line Media at graphiclinemedia.com or join our Facebook page at Graphic Line Media to get special discounts and offers.
So we got to heat it up a little bit before we bring our guest on, because there's an intersection that oftentimes, one, is not discussed, and then two, it's misconstrued. And, I'm excited about having this guest on because they're successful in business. They're entering the political arena. And oftentimes you guys don't understand how this intersects. You look at politics as politics and you're looking for them to save the day. You look at business as business owners, and no matter what level they're on, you compare the Walmarts to the corner grocery store as it relates to what you expect from someone personally, versus the big corporation. But when you look at these two and you look at things you hear about tax laws and how different taxes are affecting different classes or whatever, and you hear things about like minimum wage and what it should be for a livable wage and this and that and the other, and you start thinking about the Walmarts and the large conglomerates, overlooking how this will impact the business owners right in your community that have far more impact on your community than, say, a Walmart and whatnot, because a local business owner will donate to that sports team or sponsor an athlete or what have you in that area, while also creating jobs, and not even direct jobs all the time, but even in the circle of vendors in the operation they need, and their tax dollars are going right back into your community directly versus, being written off at some high level up here, taken out, shipped overseas, etc. So I want you guys to really focus in on today and have your questions ready for this. And we're going to welcome to the show Mr. DeWayne Washington. How you doing today?
I'm doing wonderful. How you doing?
Man, I am great. We're excited to have you on. We've been playing double dutch for a while, trying to get together. You had invited me out to your show and a couple of different things you're doing, what have you, and vice versa. And, I'm glad to have the opportunity for us to actually be able to get together and get you inside Boss Talk Radio. And for those of our audience that doesn't know your background, I try not to unjustly give people, a background because I feel like I can't do it any justice or whatever, but I feel like it's necessary to qualify the logic and the knowledge we're about to give for the audience. So, oftentimes, as we talked about backstage, a business owner that reaches a certain level of success or whatever, especially in our culture, they're called lucky, or, they had this overnight success and everybody's kind of pulling on them to give back and give breaks and this and that and the other. So tell us about your overnight success.
My overnight success started when I was 12. And I will be 47 in a couple of months. So that's it's a pretty long night. It's a pretty long night. So it has some nightmares in it. It has some good dreams, and I don't know if you remember the movie Inception. There's times when I thought I woke up, but I really didn't. I was still asleep. I don't. To say someone's like, I think that in general, there's a quote that I heard decades ago, and I really believe it, that if we want to call it luck, luck favors the prepared mind. But I'd rather say it this way. The Bible says that the harvest is great, but the laborers are few. And I actually pastor a church. And so usually when pastors talk about that, when the Bible says we should pray for the laborers, we pray for other people to come and labor for us. Right. But years ago, I changed that prayer and say, Lord, if you send the harvest, I'll be the laborer. And you'll find that opportunity is lurking everywhere. I was years ago, I built a house in Lancaster when Lancaster was still like nothing out there. I built a house between 3 cornfields, and I'm not a country boy. So like I was paying attention to everything, I was still fascinated. I was fascinated when I watched them plant everything. And like one day things like weeds everywhere. And the next day it's all cleared out and then they start planting. But I think what I was most fascinated by is whenever the harvest would come, because I had never thought about it. And I thought back to that scripture, getting the harvest was the hardest thing to do. And you only have a certain time to do it, because if you don't do it in time, I mean, it's the harvest is destroyed. But getting the harvest was the hardest thing. And in business, quite honestly, I see the same thing. It's like the work is there, the business is there. You got to put in the work. You got to do the things necessary to make it happen. And if you don't do that, well, I mean, you won't get the harvest. But no, it's not just, hey, someone lucked up and got lucky. And people who luck up and get lucky win the lottery. And we see what happens to them, several years from that. They're usually broke or in debt, something like that. Those are people who get lucky. People who are successful are taking advantage of those opportunities that come their way.
Are you suggesting that it takes some sort of a deliberate, committed effort to bring it back?
No, not at all. It's just
I mean, because, sometimes I'm talking to youth and it doesn't bother me as much when I'm talking to youth as when I'm talking to someone in our age range. And there's this sense of entitlement, like I'm here, I'm owed something, somebody should do this for me, or this athlete should, give back this, or this entertainer should give back that. And here you are just suggesting that people actually, put in work for themselves. Would you look at that?
And here's the thing. I say this all the time. Don't count anybody else's money. Okay? Whoa. Don't count anybody else's money. And if you feel, usually, I'm gonna tell you this because I live a life of philanthropy. I live a lifestyle of there's no way for me to quantify what I do for other people and what I give. There's no way to quantify it. Like I say all the time, if you can quantify it, you hadn't done enough. Right now I'm running for mayor of the city of Arlington, right? And they had asked us a question one time. What did you do for people who were during the Snowmageddon? And I mentioned a couple of things, and then I listened to all the other candidates, and I'm like, yeah. In my mind, I was thinking, yeah, I did that too. I did that too. I did, and I'm not saying that to big man myself. That's not my point. My point is, I've never seen anybody who has a lifestyle of philanthropy, and you do not have to have $30 million to have a lifestyle of philanthropy. You can take $5 right now. Go down to Walmart, buy a couple of loaves of bread, and go to Funky Town Fridge. They have fridges all over Fort Worth. Find one of those fridges or those pantries and put those 2 loaves of bread in there for people who are hungry. It does not take that. But when you live a lifestyle of philanthropy and you're around people who do that, none of them I find count other people's money. You're not worried about what somebody else can do. You're worried about what you can do. So the thing is that if you're caught up in saying, oh, so-and-so needs to get back or so-and-so needs to give back, you might want to look in the mirror because what's probably bothering you about them is something that's lacking inside of your own self. And so you need to stop and say, now, what did I do today? What did I give today? Because think about something, George. There are over 300 million people in America. If at any point 15% of those people decide to feed one family, we will not have any hungry families in America that day. And that's not saying you've got to go give $1 million. That's a McDonald's burger. That's a Wendy's hamburger. That's a pizza. Just decided to do for one family, not for 1,000, just for one. And for that day, we won't have anybody hungry that day. So do your part, whatever your part is, and don't count anybody else's money. Just count your own.
And I'm going to go one step deeper because somebody's tuning in right now or may see the playback and they're going to say, well, times are hard and I don't have $5 to give. So I'm going to give you another example. If you give 5 minutes to somebody, just even in a conversation about something you've done or been through or whatever, one, you may prevent them from having to deal with the same disaster. Two, you may pull them up in a way that's greater. But I'm sure you can attest to this, DeWayne. When you're in a lifestyle of philanthropy, you will never be void of what you need to pour into your cup, because even at your most exhaustive state, at your most worn out place, people will circle back and tell you about the purpose you serve in their life, oftentimes unintentionally.
You know what? I'm glad you're hitting on so much stuff. I wish this was like an 8-hour show because outside of this, man, we got to sit down and do dinner because we got to be cut from the same cloth somewhere. Because you're right. Time, talent, and treasures, right? Those are the things to give. Those are the three things.
I like that one.
Time, you can give your time, you can give your talents, and you can give your treasures, that money. And man, at some of my lowest points, when and this is to your entrepreneurs out there, and when I say entrepreneurs, if you're doing anything outside of the regular, somebody's paying you to do it. It could be ministry, it could be volunteer work, it could be running your business, any of that. If you're on a trajectory toward what you consider to be success, there's gonna come a time in something that you're doing that you're gonna want to say, I quit, man. It's not worth it. I want to give up. This is too tough. This is too difficult. And I don't care who you are. And let me tell you, I've been around some of the wealthiest people on the face of the planet. I've got some billionaire friends. I got friends with mansions on beaches in other countries. I've been on $30 million yachts. And I mean, even those people, when all the cameras are gone and we're just sitting back talking, and you get them to tell you about some of their lowest points, It didn't come when everybody thought it was. Sometimes it came when all the cameras were on. I know a guy who's in the he's in the record books for losing the most money in one day. The individual that has lost the most money in one day. He's in the Guinness Book of World Records. And it was because he lost several $1 billion in a day. It was because of SEC investigation. You think that doesn't affect you? You know what I'm saying? I mean, and so no matter who you are at that point where you're like, man, I want to give up. I'm telling you, somebody's going to come around and let you know, thank you so much for what you did, or I really appreciate you. The Bible, I keep referencing the Bible. The Bible says he'll give seed to the sower. And we always think about that as money. But sometimes it's a kind word. Sometimes it's encouragement that somebody gives you when you did not know it was coming and you needed it because your cup was running low. And you just needed somebody to say, hey, you remember, I had somebody, people have been posting online because I'm not a regular politician. You can figure that out very quickly. And I had a kid, a mom, post something online that, to be honest with you, George, I asked my wife about it. My wife remembers it. To be honest, I do not remember this. She said, I want you guys to go out, vote for Mr. Washington. Let me tell you about this man, what he did for my son. And she started naming all of this stuff. Now, I know who her son is, but she started naming all of this stuff. And one of the things that she named is that I paid for his college. You think I would remember that, right? I don't remember that at all, to be honest with you. And it came at a point where I really because once again, I'm not just regular politician, right? And I'm in a race with some politicians. And I needed some encouragement, quite honestly. I needed to hear. I was dealing with a bunch of different stuff, and in the middle of this campaign, and whatever. And that just happened, and it just came up online on my Facebook feed, and I was like, wow. And it wasn't like I was just feeling so proud of myself. I was feeling like something that I actually did really made a difference. It mattered. And that's what I needed to hear, because all of these plans that I have for the city, I need to know that they're going to matter, that it makes a difference, that one person can do this. And it came at a point where I really needed to hear it, and right on time.
And to, your credit, and to all of those whose credit is a philanthropic lifestyle, there's a meme that circulates on social media with a guy handing this poor family a bag of food with his camera up, taking a picture or whatever. And while some people are not that extreme, they still kind of do that metaphorically without realizing it. And the thing is that the reason, my opinion, that came to you at the time that you needed it most is because when you did what you were doing, no part of that was centered around what am I going to get out of this, what social capital is in this, what reciprocity lies in this, or whatever. You were doing something that, one, you just wanted to do. Two, you saw a need and you filled it. And I can't convey to people enough how it's like a real just pure force of nature that and my great-grandmother actually described this to me best when I was probably 5 or 6 years old, and it was behind some cookies. And she's like, well, as long as your hand's like this, nobody can get anything out of it, but you can't get anything in it. Your hand needs to be like this, and I tell people all the time, where you lack may not be in those things that you can name and or assign. Your lack may come intrinsically in what you're not offering as your gift. Now, don't y'all run out here and say, well, George said I need to, do everything for free in business or whatever. That's not what I said. But you have to have that spirit of discernment to know when to capitalize on your gifts And if you do so appropriately and properly, it will afford you the opportunity to give of your gift philanthropically without having a need for reciprocity in that space. Just know that that will come back to you even greater than any income that you ever got, So you are a serial entrepreneur. You've been in business for a couple decades. Tell us a little bit about your business ventures.
So I'll begin with the end. The newest thing that's out that I'm so excited about is the thing that actually most people have no idea I have anything to do with. And it is a board game. And we all familiar with Monopoly. It is a board game called Ebonyopoly. And so it is a African-American centric version of Monopoly. So all the different properties that are there, they all represent different areas in Black history. This particular one is kind of focused mainly on Reconstruction, but it's great. So like the railroads would be stops on the Underground Railroad, for example, and to take that history just a little bit further, we take once you get the property, and you can scan the back of the property. It takes you online to tell you all about that property. And now we're actually going around the country to visit these different places, filming videos. So after a while, we will replace those with full documentaries or pieces of documentaries actually on that. So it's if we got a minute, I can tell you kind of where that came from too. It's a really cool story. So originally we were getting ready to film something that kind of made people, what we want to do is for people to understand truly the difference when it comes to African Americans and everybody else, whether it is, Caucasians or whatever, and doing business or just surviving here in America. Because, people will say, well, we don't need things like meeby weebies. We don't need that. And we don't need this. And so I own a film company as well, FaceTime Studios. And so we were planning and putting together this documentary, kind of a small documentary that took the game of Monopoly to kind of explain the disparity across 400 years. And so taking 32 actors, each playing 4 at a time, playing 8 rounds, and those rounds would represent 50 years. So they started at 1619 and they would go up in increments of 50 years to 2019. Okay. Now, the kicker is whenever they would play, they've got to play with the rules of that particular time period. For example, you start in 1619, 3 white guys and a black guy playing, they roll the dice except for the black guy because 1619, he doesn't have any dice. Okay. Because he has no upward mobility. He has no control over his whole life. Someone else tells him. So he has no dice. Okay. But they're all playing the same game. Then theoretically, their children take over. And for those people who, for those, Caucasian men that were playing, they hand the money and the property over to the children. Well, of course, the black child gets no property and no money because there was no mobility. And then we fast forward and we're actually putting up laws that were passed. We're talking about specific laws that were put in place by the United States government, even prior to them being the United States government, that were specifically to keep African Americans down. So, for example, they could at some point, you could make a little money. It was not equivalent, but you couldn't buy any land. So everyone's still passing down land. And then you can buy land, but they put a clause in place that said you could not pass that land down to your sons. Right. So still literally just being held back time after time and time. So we fast forward to 2019. And once again, like when you pick the cards up, cards will say things like, oh, if you're a black player, you're being lended out to this other player. And so everyone else is making money off of you, but you're not making money. And we're citing these laws that actually allow that to happen. So we fast forward to 2019, where on the surface, everything's equal. Everybody can buy, everybody can sell, everybody can go around and get $200. The difference is surface. Right on the surface, right? The difference is below the surface. These other 3 have 400 years worth of accumulation, whether it's knowledge, property, money, whatever it is, versus the 2019 guy starting with absolutely nothing, and we're expecting that race to be equal. Now, it will be different if it was just based on personal preference, but we're talking about laws that were put in place specifically by the government to keep people down. And so it was to kind of explain that whole process, to explain how it is, and explain what equity really looks like. And in that actually came, go ahead.
I want to take a moment to kind of put the shovel in the ground right here and go a little bit deeper. Because my opinion, I think it requires a certain mental fortitude and intelligence to be able to acknowledge without digesting a victimology mindset. While you mentioned like there's this thing on the surface, right? And we know by being engaged that not even far below the surface, I mean, something's right there. You know, there's these
small skin, an epidermis,
right,
right below it.
There's these systemic challenges that we have, and I think that folks like you and I are in this unique space where, on this side, we're fighting the challenge of it, but on this side, we're explaining or trying to teach that it's not an excuse or whatever.
Yeah.
Look at me.
It's a thin line. I mean, it came out of a conversation I was having with a friend of mine who's a very prominent CFO and you know, Caucasian gentleman, probably about 10, 15 years my elder. And he was like, you know, basically, you know, DeWayne, what's the deal? You know, because they look at people like us and say, well, you know, you made it, so there's no problem, there's no issue. And I knew his background. So I began to ask questions, and these were loaded questions because I knew his background. And I asked him where he grew up, and he told me where he grew up, and asked him what school he went to, we graduated from, and what about his father and grandfather, and they're all from the same alma mater. And I asked him, growing up, were you a Republican or Democrat in your household? And he said, we were conservative. I said, cool. So what about your grandfather? He said, conservative. I was waiting for him to ask the question. He finally did. He said, well, what about you guys? And he expected an answer. What I gave him is, well, when my mom was growing up, her mom couldn't vote, so it didn't matter. And the school that you went to, both you, your father, and your grandfather, and because I asked him what attributed to his success, and he said, you know, where he grew up and those types of values in his area and those schools. And I told him school that he went to didn't allow Black people. Neither did the area that you lived in. And so all the things that you attribute to being to contribute to your success were off limits to people like my grandfather and my father and my mother. And because what I was explaining to him is that I am generation one free in America. I was the first generation born free. And when I talked to my mom about that one day, she was like, no, that's not true. She's like, I was born free. I said, no, you wasn't. I said, Mama, you have one day a year you can go to the zoo in Fort Worth, Texas, Negro Day. You had one day a year that you could go down to the fair. You couldn't go to public pools. You couldn't. Your dad couldn't just go to the golf course. You couldn't go into the front door. You couldn't go inside of a lot of restaurants. Had to go out back. You were not born free, right? In America, I was born free. I was born to a situation where I could do all of those things, but I was the first generation that was born in. So we look at the first generation, and sometimes we see people who are successful from that, and wonder why, and use that as a catalyst for, well, everything's equal now. We should all be able to do that. And so while you're right on one end, you're fighting that mentality, saying, wait, there's a reason why there's a gap. Now, there's some things that are in place. And even with my success, there's some things that I was able to be successful from that I was not supposed to have access to. And then on the other side, you know, telling our people, don't use that as an excuse. You still got to be successful anyway. Let's move forward and make things happen. And so it's a fine line to be able to acknowledge what has happened, but not utilize that as victimhood.
Right. And so how do you personally, because I got to tell you, I'm loving the Generation One free. Eric, I need a t-shirt. I'm loving that. So And when you put that in perspective, I've seen recently where the generation right behind us, and God forbid those in their 20s, have kind of looked at the generation before us and said, well, hey, look, y'all went about the whole thing wrong. Y'all don't know what y'all talking about as it applies to today. But I can see this generation over here, our mothers and fathers, looking at our kids and thinking, you're wasting the biggest opportunities ever. How do you bridge the conversation between them understanding that this generation went to it and through it and was successful in their own right in spite of whether they accumulated millions or was able to pass stuff down, not being equivocal to what is deemed American success today, but had to go through what they went through just to create this opportunity for generation one free. And so generation 2 and 3 need to really just, take that thing to the next level. Because you and I were around when the little guy was running across the screen and it took 20 minutes to connect the internet. You press to connect the internet and go cook dinner.
Hey, man, let me tell you something. So I'm going to date myself. So me and a couple of friends, a lot of people don't even know this term ISP, internet service provider. They may remember AOL, or now they know Spectrum or something like that. Me and a couple of friends owned what was the only Black-owned ISP in the country back in the 90s.
Wow.
So I go way back. I used to work side by side with one of the guys that. I was working for a company, GTE, owning my own company as well. But when the internet was new, and GTE, a lot of people don't know, actually bought a company called BBM Planet. BBM Planet is the company that actually created the internet. So I was working with people who, for example, put the @ symbol in email addresses. And we know HTTP now, but like there was a bunch of different protocols back then, Gopher sites and the whole nine. The only two that really survived was FTP and HTTP, and now HTTPS. So like I go way, way back, right, to the beginning of this thing. But I think the way to bridge the gap is through proximity and through understanding. When I look at my parents, and I have to look at my parents through the lens of what they had to do. A lot of financial knowledge that I have did not come from my parents. And I'm not mad at them for. I remember when I was young, me and my mom having a semi-argument where she was like, you know what? There's two things you always gonna have, is a car note and a house note. I said, no, Mom, I'm not gonna have either. I'm gonna keep living. I'm not gonna have either. And because that's all she knew. And now you look at my mom. Okay, when my mom became debt free, she came and told me. She's like, hey, I don't have either now either. I don't have a house note, don't have a car note. But I didn't expect for her to give me financial knowledge. What I expect for her to do is what she did: keep me alive, right? And what her generation did is they got laws passed to even the playing field, to allow me to open businesses. You didn't have to give me the business savvy, just even the playing field so that I can do it. I'm literally running for mayor. I'm the youngest. If I'm elected, I'll be the youngest mayor ever in the city. Okay. That is huge. When I first moved to the city, I got followed every day when I was 16, every single day by the police. So to even the playing field, I'm able to run for mayor in that city. So they did what they were supposed to do. They got laws changed to even the playing field. My generation's job is to build a foundation. And what I tell my children is my ceiling should be your floor. And so it's up to us. Yeah, there you go. Teaching financial. If I brought my 13, 14-year-old in here right now, and he start spewing some financial literacy to you, it'll trip you out. And if he start talking about what his bank account looks like right now, it tripped me out the other day. It was like, I need to go to the bank, got to deposit some money. I'm thinking, okay, you need to put, $20 in the bank, $50 in the bank. This dude is throwing out hundreds. like, wait a minute. dude, you're like 14. Like I didn't have that in 14 years. But that's our job, right? Our job is to make sure that we build that solid foundation, because the kids that are behind us, okay, our generation did something. That Generation X, we looked at the people ahead of us and we kind of did the same thing. There's some things we appreciated and there's some things we said we are not going to do. I don't, is most of your listening audience, are they African American?
It varies, but the larger percentage, yeah.
Okay. So from an African American perspective, we looked at some things and said, we appreciate you, but we see the downfall. We seen the downfall in Jackie Robinson coming over and playing in the major leagues because it destroyed the Negro leagues. We seen the downfall of African Americans running to people who didn't want to serve us before and making them serve us, because now Meemaw's Kitchen that was serving you the whole time, now we're going over to Woolworth and everywhere else, and Meemaw and them went out of business. And so you see that our generation is saying we're not really looking for acceptance anymore. We don't need you to say that we're okay. We don't need your checkbox.
No validation necessary.
We don't need your validation. We need those laws to be the same. So when I do my taxes and I utilize those same tax strategies that Trump used, okay, I need my AGI to be just as low. I need my tax burden to come down, and thankfully, for the most part, that is the case. But I don't need you to validate it. Okay, I no longer need you to say that. Okay, so for example, our Ebonyopoly game, sold out our first shipment before the shipment was even put on the boat. Okay. And I was surprised we had some, non-African American and non-Black people purchase it, but unapologetically Black. I mean, not making any people like you how to cross over. There's 1.2 billion Black people in the world. Why do I need to cross over? I don't need to be legitimized by that. I don't.
Can we get the collection plate?
Say it again.
So can we get the collection plate?
Pass the plate. But I just don't need it. And we've been sold that bill of goods. Even in something simplistic as make your money, get out the hood. That's what we were taught. We grew up in the hood, make your money, get out the hood. And that's what we did. We made our money and we got out the hood. You know what nobody taught us? Make your money and make the hood better. And so because of that, I gotta put a pause on that one right there, because we ain't gonna blow past that like you didn't just say it, because that's a very convoluted area right there. And once again, we're gonna pull out the shovel and go a little bit deeper. We're gonna take a quick commercial break and be right back.
Have you ever wanted to get into the tax industry but didn't know where to begin? Or maybe just wished you could turn your social media likes into hard cash? Now you can. Elite 8 Tax Pro Solutions has everything you need to start or grow your own tax business. We even have a referral program for those just looking to earn extra cash without having to learn the ins and outs of taxes. For as little as $99, you can unlock unlimited earning potential in the tax industry with the tools, support, and training of an industry leader. Visit ElitePTS.com today for more information.
Welcome back to Boss Talk Radio. We're live with DeWayne Washington, mayoral candidate, serial entrepreneur. And did I just pick up an echo?
Hey George. Before we do that, I just seen a commercial where you got a $99 tax preparation. Is that to start a business?
That's to get into the business with some of the primary tools that you need, and it tiers up for them. But yeah.
Okay. Have people ever contacted you and say, I would like to do that, but I don't have the $99?
Exactly.
Okay, check this out. We're going to take away that excuse for at least one person. Okay. So the next person that contacts you, and I'm gonna let you decide. Okay. Next person contacts you and they're really earnest, they want to do it, but they're loan of dollars or just got out of prison. You name whatever it is. Okay, I got that one. So I'm actually going to do the next $99 when we get off this call. Because I believe in people starting their own business, and I believe in taking away excuses and barriers as well. So I got you on that next one. How about that?
I will take you up on that offer, but I would limit it to someone that's doing a re-entry into the workforce.
I'm gonna let you decide.
And the reason being is because, and it ties into what we were talking about right before the break, because I'm guilty of at different stages having these different mentalities as it relates to the get out of the hood part and so forth and so on. So to this day, I have debates with some of my classmates from high school, so forth and so on. First, let me qualify this because it doesn't take you to live there, but if you've ever visited New Orleans, Louisiana, you know that thought processes are very, very different for the natives. So what I found early on in life, because I knew at 11 that business ownership was the thing for me. I got constantly talked at about all the reasons that didn't make sense, or that couldn't be done, or shouldn't be done. And even when I pushed forward and did it, what I wasn't ready to accept at the time was these two things. Number one, environment matters. And number two, you can't save everybody. You may want more for people than they want for themselves, but you have to put on your mask before you can help someone else. And so
the best way to help a poor person is to not be one.
And so it was imperative that the first thing I did was put myself in an environment conducive for success. And then the next part was to identify who really wanted it. You know, and by wanting it, I mean going back to what we were talking about at the top of the conversation, which was putting in the labor. You know, everybody kind of want to come in the kitchen when the pie come out the oven. You know, some people don't even mind helping you cut and mix some ingredients. But when it comes time to go dig out there and plant that peach tree or that apple tree or whatever, that's where things get a little tough at, you know. And so with that said, you mentioned, you know, we were taught, hey, you know, kind of get out of the hood or whatever. And this part that we missed was the quote unquote making the hood better. And you took me back somewhere in my childhood. And I can't say I necessarily can make the connection, but something got lost somewhere between when once upon a time I happened to grow up in the lower ninth ward of New Orleans, Louisiana, and at a time where it was genuinely a neighborhood because it wasn't but about 6 families down here. And you were related to somebody, you know. I mean, 5 generations down 1 or 2 blocks kind of thing, you know. I remember a time though that my mind was too young to process the bad element, but mature enough to recognize that when Grandpa walked through, any foolishness going on stopped. You know, you cleared the block, you know, and he just commanded that type of respect as a business person and as a deacon and so forth and so on. And he didn't have to get into it with people, you know, for this to happen. It was just a natural thing. Today, the neighborhood is more the hood. That element of respecting certain things by nature doesn't seem to really exist. It's more of a, you really have to earn respect person to person, not even like this person don't respect you just because that person do type of thing. Where is the disconnect?
Well, let's double down into that, right? New Orleans is a perfect place to be able to double down in that, because it was probably the last place where what I'm getting ready to say happened. You growing up in the lower ninth ward, you will see that there and surrounding areas, maybe outside of the ward a little bit, had a what we call a veritable plethora of individuals. In other words, there was a lot of different diversity of thought, a lot of different types of people. You could make a lot of money and live close to the ninth ward. If we go back far enough, there were areas where only black people could live. Black here in Fort Worth, black people couldn't live everywhere. It was redlined. I mean, there were certain places where they can live, and I don't care how much money you had, didn't make a difference. So what happens is that now you have all different types of people that the only thing that they have in common is their plight, right? The fact that they're African American. But you have doctors, you have lawyers, you have pimps, you have everything right there together. And like you just said, environment matters. So if I was to say, marahaba kaifa or shalom, sha'oya, shoma, shatore, or annyeong, aseo, depending on where you're from in the world, you would respond differently to that, right? But if you're not from any of those countries, and I can go through 20 of those, there will probably be no response at all because it's a language you're not familiar with. Not because you're not smart enough to catch it. It's just that your environment didn't teach you that. Maybe you weren't born in Iran, so you don't speak Persian, or you're not in Korea, so you don't speak Korean, or France or French, whatever it is. Because your environment didn't speak that, you don't speak it. So now let's fast forward that to how that affects our neighborhoods now. When you have, I'll say this, I'll say the difference in a little girl's terms, what she said, instead of my words. This is what the hood looks like now. She said, if I seen my neighbor, if my across the street neighbor, when she gets up in the morning, if I seen her going to her law office and practicing law, I might want to be a lawyer. The neighbor next to me, if I seen her going to her doctor's office practicing medicine, I might want to be a doctor. She said, that's not what I see every day. And more importantly, if they do become doctors and lawyers, they move away from me. And so I say all the time that if I can control what you see and what you hear to some degree, I can control what you think. And so now, because we're allowed to move anywhere we want to, and we can, quote unquote, get out the hood, you got to say, well, what's left? What's left in the hood? Well, those people who may not be upwardly mobile, those people who may not be doing some serious entrepreneurial things. And so now you remove them from the environment and you have the perpetuation of a poverty mentality, right? So that's why you'll see people, even if they have an entrepreneurship spirit, and I've dealt with probably somewhere around 10,000 drug dealers now. I was volunteer of the year in youth prisons. So you got to spend a lot of time in a youth prison and a prison in general to be volunteer of the year. So I spent my share of time with drug dealers, both on the outside and on the inside. I never met one that liked selling drugs. I met a lot of them that was trying to feed their family or trying to make money to some degree. And the ones that did well at it would have done well in any entrepreneurship effort. It doesn't make a difference. It could have done well selling wine or ironically, I got a good friend of mine who went to prison for selling drugs and now has his own brand of wine that he ships around the world. So that is just proof positive of that same mentality, that same skill set can be put to use. The difference is access. Now, I'm not saying that you've got to live in the hood to affect the hood, right? I'm saying what we weren't taught is make your money and make the hood better, whether you live there or not. Being able to come back and have those programs so that people can see, somebody that came from where they came from, or that looks like they look, and giving them specific examples of how to do that. We've got our FTH initiative that's getting ready to jump off later this year. That's all about that. FTH, Fix the Hood. And I believe that the hood and people from the hood can fix it themselves. Once again, we don't need validation. We don't need the city to do a whole lot of things, because when the city does a lot of stuff, they start gentrifying and they start pushing those people out. But there's a lot of things that we can do just ourselves and helping to put ourselves back on the map. But we have to do it. There's work to be done. And like you said, there are some people that just want to be lazy. I mean, there's nothing I can do about that. I mean, if you
I was just going to ask you how much, because you mentioned access, and this is a very, very difficult topic for me to rightfully divide, because when somebody says they don't have access and they don't have one of these, I can kind of bite into it. But when I see people walking around with these $1,200 paperweights, using it for everything other than information, I'm pulled in a different direction. So how much does personal
let's dive down into
matter?
Right. Let's dive down into it, because, you know, I do business, and I do business in 10 countries. Right. And one of the things that gets me around the world is when I came up with the FTH initiative. Initially, it was to help third world countries turn into first world countries, utilizing their natural resources, not resources that are in the ground, but resources that are in those individual people. And because, you know what, you can go to Haiti. Haiti has some. First of all, Haiti is gorgeous. It's not the pictures that they put up in front of us. Once again, if I can control what you see, what you hear, I can control how you think. And so Haiti is gorgeous. I mean, it's an island. And the people there are ridiculously talented. There's a lot of talent there. There's a lot of poverty there, but it's a lot of poverty here too. But so when we look at it and say, you know, who do we help or who do we not help, or you know, what has access and what doesn't, I want to remind your listeners of how you train an elephant. I had heard this story before, but it didn't get real to me until I was standing in front of this elephant. You know, I was literally standing right there, and I'm looking up at this elephant, and I'm talking to the trainer, and I'm like, "What? How come he don't just walk away? Like, what's that? He's been here all day. He ain't moved." And the trainer was like, "Well, look around his leg." And it was like a little, you know, I heard about the stake, you know, like they take the elephant, the tiny elephants, and drive a stake in the ground and put the thing around their legs so they can't move it. And then when they're older, you know, they put the same stake in the ground, but, you know, they don't try. The stake wasn't even there. It was just a rope around his leg. I'm like, dude, he can just walk over all of us right now. Like, this is because there was like a little, I can't even call it a fence or a gate. It was literally a rope, like a thin rope around this elephant, and I'm in there with him, and I'm like, this rope is not gonna stop. He can step over the rope. Like, man, this is not safe. You know what I'm saying? They're like, no, that elephant isn't going anywhere. And the reason why is that it's not the access, it's the fact that he doesn't know he can. If you don't know that you can, you won't even try. You know, right now I'm dealing with a whole lot of people not voting. About 95 to 97% of people do not vote in local elections. I mean, I want you to just think about it. 95 to 97% of people do not vote in the election that affects them the most, the election that affects their taxes on their homes, that affects their water, their streets. I mean, literally affects whether they can stay in that house or not. 95 to 97% of people all over the country, Arlington is no different, do not vote in local elections. So think about it. And then when I talk to young people, they're like, I don't think my vote counts. I don't think my vote matters. And I tell them, I said, who do you think implanted that idea into your head? Probably somebody that didn't want your vote to count, that didn't want you to vote, period. Because if you did, our government would look a lot different than it looks now. But more insidious and more dangerous than any Jim Crow, than any poll tax, than any test that they can give you to register to vote. This more insidious than that is to make you believe that it doesn't matter. And so if you don't think it matters, you won't even do it. And so the same thing of, you know, you walking around, I'm with you with the $1,200 paperweights and stuff. You have access to the knowledge of the history of the world. All human knowledge is literally available at your fingertips. But if you don't think that it matters, if you don't think that you can, I'm telling you, you won't even take the first step. As a businessman, we've all heard of Think and Grow Rich, right? Napoleon Hill. What a lot of people may not know is that was not the first book put out by Napoleon Hill. Actually, Think and Grow Rich is the quote unquote dumbed down or abridged version of his original piece when he came out. When Napoleon Hill first came out, he came out with a book called The Law of Success in 16 Lessons. I think I got it sitting right here. And it's a 600-page book. And it is incredible. And if you haven't read that, please go read it. It'll change your life. Because when he came out with it, they said, this is too much information. You need to take this off the shelf. And it is. And I see why, because it gave away every secret. But my point in bringing up that book is that every chapter begins the same. You can do it if you believe you can. And so what we're dealing with is not information. Information's there. It's not the access. You have the access to information. It's the belief, right? If you don't believe that you can, and I don't blame people for not having the belief, right? Because that goes back to environment. I didn't start a company internationally till I was international dealing with a friend of mine's company. I'm sitting there in another country, and the thought occurred to me to do something in that country. But it was access. It was environment. I was literally living in that environment. And so I had that thought. That thought came to me at that point. But had I not had that particular proximity or that environment, I may not have thought it.
So that's a very good point. You tied that all together very well, even the personal choice part. So let me ask you this question, because we got into the part about voting specifically in the local elections, and anybody that follows me know that I'll sit in silence, grow frustrated, and go 0 to 100 about politics real quick. And here's the reason why. There was a time, and you can write it off to traditions, there was a time that there were certain things I just wanted to do every year. Like I had to go to this event or that festival, and one day, for no particular reason, I was like, why am I repeating things versus experiencing new things? So I adopted this kind of a been there, done that mentality, and on to the next thing, or what have you. But saying that to say, there's two things I remember hearing just repetitively in the 80s, growing up, and it was going to college and voting. And my sentiment is, if this is what we were talking about 30 odd years ago, why hasn't the needle moved? Why are we still talking about going to college versus talking about how to make a plan out of going to college, or going to college with a specific purpose or whatever? Why are we're still talking about going out to vote and registering to vote and getting to the polls? Why haven't we advanced that conversation into talking about the political processes or engagement past the polls? Why haven't we gotten into a conversation about a community coming together, choosing someone like yourself, and then backing that person through the process, and then working with that person past that date once you're there? Because I think it's unfair to a candidate to campaign and win, and everybody say, okay, we got you there, do what you need to do with, I think that's the point where we really have to stay engaged and see how to, like, that person is the orchestrator at this point, but everybody has to still come together and turn that dirt, do that labor.
Yeah. And that works both ways. At one point, many moons ago, I was setting my life up to be a senator. And then by a stroke of different events, I ended up in DC on the Hill for about a year and started seeing senators and hanging out with senators. And I don't want to be a senator anymore. But one of the things that was happening is I was the head of technology, the CIO for the national NAACP in Baltimore. And Mr. Hillary had an office there on the Hill, and I got a chance to be there with him on the Hill. And one of the things that they did from an NAACP perspective is they took a scorecard on how these individual senators and reps voted versus what they said they would do. And it was appalling to see how many people would say one thing in public and literally go and vote the exact opposite every single time. Well, the reason that they were able to do that is that nobody's watching. You know, nobody was paying attention. Nobody. I promise you, I've been in Parliament in London while Parliament was in session and listened to these people kind of argue and go back and forth, and they have the heart of the people. Say whatever you want to say about those people, but you can tell like they're all arguing on the side of the people. When you come to, if you ever are able to watch these people in Washington, D.C., most of them are not arguing on the side of the people. They're arguing on the side of whatever entity paid them to do whatever. But they can do that because nobody's paying attention. And now, quite honestly, now that's when we go a little deeper. You say grab the shovel. I think part of why they're not paying attention is debt. Folks are just trying to pay off stuff and the whole none. And so they don't have time. They're working too hard to be able to stop and pay attention to it. If people only had to work 6 months out the year or 15 hours a week to be able to get their bills paid and they had more time to pay attention, I think our government would look different. But they don't, so we end up.
Let's that still goes back to me. That still kind of goes back to the personal choice part because, hey, you have to work 40, 50, 60 hours a week to get it or whatever. But if you're still, spending 15 hours in front of the boob tube, 6 hours on social media.
So wait, hold on. Let me make sure I double down into that, for example. So I'm not talking about from an entrepreneurship perspective. Entrepreneurs, I always say, we all work half days. You want to work the first 12 hours or the second, which one you want to do. I'm talking about the individual person. Imagine that to satisfy all of your needs at the house, home, lights, water, whatever. It only required you to work 15 hours a week.
I got that. Yeah. But still with that, and this is just how I approach this all the time, because the question I always ask is, what's the objective? When you approach any obstacle from that perspective versus, okay, it has to be done like this or like that, then it opens up a different type of dialogue. And when you have, because the one thing we can't all control all of our time, that is ultimately, or I think should be anybody's goal, is to spend the time today to have more control of their time tomorrow. But with that said, for the time you can control or opt to control or whatever, what are the choices that you're making? Or is it that in a book, or is that in, community engagement? And I'm not saying anybody's obligated to do any one part of that, but if you're not participating in that process.
These days, what I don't want to hear is somebody say, oh, I don't have time. You know how many books are written every day on Facebook? When you look at the amount of words that are actually spent writing, like, no, you had time. There's two things. There's one thing that happened years ago. When I was, this was 1995, okay? And I was working for Microsoft. I was supporting Windows 95. So you can imagine in 95, and for people who are not that old, the what you see now in Windows started in 95. Windows did not look like that before 95. It looked like something totally different. So you can imagine how many calls we were getting, because it was revolutionizing the way that computers were actually being done. So I had the 2 years previous to that, or a year previous to that, long story short, I ended up being homeless in New York. But it was hilarious. So I took notes on like the back of napkins and paper towels and all kind of stuff, because I'm like, this is a movie. If I ever get off of this homeless thing, I'm gonna make a movie. I had no idea that 20 some years later I would actually own a film company. But so I took notes. Now, while I was working at Microsoft, in between calls, which there were only seconds in between calls, I was able to write an entire movie script from beginning to end. Right. And I remember that took me a few months, but I remember looking at that saying, this is the physical manifestation of my free time. I'm looking at what seconds look like when you put focus to them. And even though this is going to sound crass, but just to be honest, the latest book that I wrote the entire book from the opening letter to the last dot on the toilet. Like literally, I had a little writing thing next to me on the toilet. Every time I went to the toilet, I would write. Okay, I got out the toilet. I would stop, but I would write every single time I was on the toilet. And once again, got done with the book. Here's a physical manifestation of my toilet time. And my point is not to be gross or gross anybody out, is that we've got time. You know what I'm saying? If you put that time to use and put it to focus, you'll be surprised at what you'll be able to do. You may not want to write a book. You may not want to write a screenplay, but whatever it is that you want to do, I promise you can get it done in the gaps.
Yeah, we had Dr. Jeffrey Sterling on the show back in season 1. He authored the book 72 Hours in a Day. And he has this segment he has where he itemized these tasks that he can get done in 5 minutes, and even down to, he has one that's called 72 seconds, and we'll literally set timers for this type of stuff or whatever. And when you read his biography or whatever, when you're reading his intro or whatever, before they get to the end, everybody's asking the same question, and it's a great setup for the book or whatever, because he's coming on and talking about time management or whatever. But as they're reading through this, there's this point where everybody inevitably gets to this question of, how in the hell did you do all of this in one lifetime? And it's really just a very deliberate and committed use of time. I only hope to get to that point one day, because there's days where I'm like beating myself up, like, today I didn't get it in like I should have or whatever. I'm
telling you, I do the same thing though. I time everything. I use EGG timer. I will pull up something and say, you know what, I'm gonna give myself 6 minutes to take care of this task, and it might be something like build this website. And so, I get asked that all the time. And how do you do so much? Because one day I might be on a stage, playing as a saxophone player. I got 7 albums out. I sat on the Grammy board. The next day I'm out of the country, meeting with the president, of that country. And the next day I'm, doing something with the Wall Street Journal. And people are like, how is that possible? It's the same 24 hours, but you just got to maximize it.
That part right now. Take that part you just said, because I was waiting, it was like double dutch. I was waiting to jump in on that. This is my thing. While we have the systemics, while we have these prior generational laws, and while we are generation 1 free, here's one thing that is indisputable. We all have 24 hours, and what you choose to do with those 24, because depending on your capital level, you may not have ultimate control of those 24, but you have something within that 24 that you have the choice of. And it's those pockets of choice that creates even more time for you, the whole automating processes and things of that nature. And this is my passion about the part about personal choice, and not really wanting to hear a bunch of excuses and whatnot, because at the end of the day, when I was able to apply what I do in finance to time, meaning the numbers don't lie, when I was able to apply it to time, it was like, wow, like sometimes I turn around and kick myself because I'll tell somebody, hey, I don't have the time or whatever, I haven't found the time and whatnot. And when I catch myself saying that, I'm like, okay, I have to change these words, because I know that what I'm really saying is not that I don't have the time. What I'm really saying is that I have to find the time in the schedule, because one of the things I believe wholeheartedly is I don't do dual attention on anything that I'm doing at a specific moment.
So it's a question of priority, right? If your studio caught on fire right now, the most important thing would be getting out. You know what I'm saying? That will be the priority. That will be the next thing. And so
actually, we'll be getting this drive over here.
I was gonna say get what you got to get first, because I'm like, if my house caught on fire right now, I'd be grabbing these movie cameras real quick trying to get it. I would grab some things, you know, and then get out. But it would be, how do I get safe and how do I get my stuff out, right? And then the second priority might be, you know, who to call and make sure everybody else is safe and that kind of thing. But it's one of priority, and I think that if you want to rule your day, there's two things that I do that I think probably blow everything else out of the water that I do. One is I have a perpetual to-do list that has priority along with it, right? So at any point, I can't remember the last time I was bored. I hadn't been bored probably since I was 5, right? So I know what things need to be done, and I know the importance of them. The other thing that I will do, I used to be a night owl. Now I don't do that. I will take my butt to bed because I'm going to get up, not with an alarm or anything like that, but I'm going to get up between 3 and 4 o'clock in the morning. I have 4 children. I have a wife that loves me. My family loves me. They like me a whole lot, and I appreciate that. But it also means that sometimes that attention is going to be on them. But here's what I do know. None of them jokers is getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning. Mm-hmm. that is not happening. So even when I was at corporate, had a regular corporate job and ran departments, I would get up early and finish all the things that I needed to do before 9 o'clock. By the time I got to work, I'm finished. And then I'm available for my team for the rest of the day. I'm available for thought leadership. I'm available to be able to put together plans because I'm done with my work. So same thing now is, I get up early. My hard tasks, like if it's a task that really requires a lot of thought process and a lot of thinking and that kind of stuff, I'm going to do that, 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning when there's zero distractions, because I've learned that what would take me an hour to do when I'm tired literally might take 3 minutes when I'm totally plugged in and focused.
Mm-hmm. So let's hit this last question. And this is a point of curiosity for not only myself, but I'm sure the listeners in the constituency in District 6. With all of these years of experience, success, service, mentorship, and whatnot, with the resume that you have, why do you want to run for mayor?
So I'm glad you put it like that. Why do I want to run for mayor? Because I've said when people say, I want to be mayor, I look at them sideways, because either you don't understand what that job really entails, you're lying to us, or you're a crook. What we really want to do is to be able to have a certain amount of impact. And so I'm glad you said what you said, because it's the impact and trajectory that I want to change. I've said before in this race that people like me usually don't run for office for a lot of reasons. We got other things to do. We're trying to change the world and all over the world. And so when you see somebody like me put their hat in for office, pay close attention, because it means something is really, really wrong. I mean, really wrong. And so as we look at the city of Arlington, I'm watching, I deal with root issues and root problems, as you probably can tell, like when you talked about, hey, why are the hoods like this? Well, we deal with the actual root issue that caused that to happen. And so I'm watching things happen in my own city that I don't see happen in third world countries. And I know what the end result would look like. Perfect example is, we're doing a great job of building stadiums. It's phenomenal. We got some of the world-class stadiums, but we're taking people's homes to do it. We're racking up debt to do it. Our debt's tripled in the last 5 years. And so what we're not paying attention to is the degradation of our schools. We have derated schools, right? We have crime that is on the rise. And all of that is a result that schools are not struggling. Families are struggling, right? We see families getting kicked out of the house because the taxes have gone. Here in Arlington, we've seen situations in the past couple of years where some taxes have for their homes have doubled in 1 year. Mm-hmm. Doubled. You were paying $5,000, now you're paying $10,000. Doubled. And so for a lot of people who couldn't afford it, got kicked out. Even people that were renting, the folks they were renting from, they could no longer make money because it ate up their profits. So they're like, I can't rent a house to you anymore. I need to go ahead and sell it, make my money, and do something else. So now those people are out of a home. And so when you start seeing that these things that they're doing are affecting everyday folks, and I've got friends that are developers, and I love them to death. But part of why I'm running is that I watch what they do, both here and around the world, around the country, and it's great for them and their organizations and their people. But some of it is bad for the citizens that live in that city. And so as someone who understands the philanthropy piece of it, that understands the human capital piece of it, that understands how budgets work, how money works, and how cities are governed, and not even how countries are governed, and how all of that works together, and being able to understand the heart of the people from the very, very poorest on the street to the billionaire on the boat, and be able to speak all of those languages and understand the importance of all of those areas. I felt that I was probably the best suited to go in and change the trajectory. Number one, have the guts, the know-how, the skill, the will, and the knowledge to make it happen, and the ability to inspire others to be their best self, and the understanding of where the change needs to be made. You know, a lot of cities, when crime goes up, let's hire more police officers. It's the dumbest thing in the world. That's like saying cancer rates are increasing. To be able to solve the cancer problem, let's go hire a bunch of nurses. Nurses respond to sickness just like police officers respond to crime. If your crime rate is going up, that's not a police issue. You have a systemic problem from a social perspective that you need to handle from a social issue. You know, I was talking with a police officer about it, and he was like, well, you know, we don't want to have a social worker answer the phone calls. I'm like, I never said anything about a social worker. I said, let's stop the call from coming. You know what I'm saying? Let's do that. Let's change the hearts and minds of individuals. You know, I'm gonna send you something. We recorded a music video about my campaign, and to explain the different aspects of the campaign. And so I'm rapping through it. And one of the things I said, you know, a debt-free city with crime on the low. And they said, what's your plan? Hire more police? No, because police don't stop crime. They respond to it. We can change a criminal's mind before they do it. Right. And so that in effect is how you lower crime. That is how you increase your school districts, because school, as one that's I'm in a classroom every week, right? Every week. And when you look at the problems that schools are having, the overwhelming majority of it showed up on their campus. They didn't create those issues. Those issues are coming from these children's homes. Right. And so if we solve those issues and problems, we'll be able to change an entire city. And Arlington is the dream city. And I want everyone to be able to live the dream. I've lived my dream. And I want to allow as many people to do that as possible. And so we've done a great job of facilities, but now we need to put that same focus. You know, if you walk around our entertainment district, it is gorgeous. And it is a perfect example of what a city can do when they focus on something. So if we've done that from a building up of an entertainment district, imagine what we could do if we start focusing on families. So it's all about families over facilities.
Awesome. Tell us how people can support you in the campaign and find out more about you.
First off, no matter where you're listening to, if you're here in the Metroplex, you can go. I want you to get out and vote. Early voting starts Monday. Get out early. I don't want to have any excuses. Okay. People are already trying to take away your right to vote. They're trying to take away your right to vote while telling you they're not. Okay. We just seen this stuff happen in Georgia, and they'll say, oh, we did this. We extended this. We added more Saturdays, and other people saying, oh, but yeah, they won't let us hand out water. None of those are the issue. Go look back at the individual things that they're saying. They're basically saying we're going to put power in people to be able to say who won and who didn't. That's the thing no one's even talking about. That when you look at those election judges and those things that they're putting in place and trying to change those laws, they're trying to take away your ability for your vote to count. So don't do that. Get out and vote April 19th. Look up wherever you are, Arlington, Fort Worth, Grand Prairie, wherever you are, go out and vote. If you would like to support me, you can go to WashingtonForArlington.com. I had that graphic here. I was going to bring it up, but WashingtonForArlington.com, and that's spelled out Washington, F-O-R, Arlington.com. You can go there. You can sign up to be on the team. You can sign up to come out to the polls with us. You can give money. Thank you so much. Look at that. That's what I'm talking about. This man is on point. You can give money. We're in the thick of it now. We're in the thick of it. And to be able to stand out, we definitely need some more dollars to be able to make it happen in these last 2 weeks. So once again, WashingtonForArlington.com. You can go there. You can give us ideas on what you think the city should look like. You can give us your concerns. You can give your treasures. You can donate to the campaign. Anything you want to do, or you can say, I want to join the team, and we would love to have you join the team and be part of what we do and are really in it over the next 2 weeks. So I'd appreciate your support.
Thank you for being on, DeWayne. Highly appreciated. Look forward to the opportunity to work with you in some of the philanthropy areas, and specifically the financial literacy piece as we go down the course of 2021. I wish you the best in the campaign. And everybody, that's WashingtonForArlington.com. You can find out more about DeWayne Washington there. You can learn more about what his platform is and what he stands for. And more importantly, you can sign up to serve in or to donate. This has been another episode of Boss Talk Radio. We will see you guys on Monday for our motivation piece. And one last thing, proud uncle moment, because you guys often ask me about the new intro and premiering today, the new outro for Boss Talk Radio, and who that is. That is my niece, Jada J, and she's dropped her first EP today. Be sure to visit my page, go pick that up. She has 5 bangers on there. It's the return of R&B, and we're signing out.
Boss Talk Radio, keeping it real, yeah, that's for sure. I said a Boss Talk Radio, here for your needs, we'll crack the code. He the boss, ooh, he the boss, ooh, yeah, he the boss, he's the boss, he the boss, he the boss.